adaptive response during COVID and how the lessons we can learn from it. Just as a disclaimer, I will say that I'm just trying to give out my own opinion, and I am not here to provide solution, but probably to add to the problem. And so basically that's what we want to do today. Okay, so quickly I just want to give a little autobiography into my own experience as a social scientist, which I refer to as my journey into geoengineering. In my undergraduate level, I worked on the Copenhagen conference in 2009, and I looked at the position of North and South in the Copenhagen conference. And then after that, in my graduate school, it was just in a class, a lecturer asked us, what would be the reason for conflicts in Africa and the Middle East? And in the class, everybody was trying to give out reasons why they feel the conflict is happening. And then I just thought it through and I said, probably it's going to be as a result of air condition theory. So I came up with that theory that day, air condition theory. At that time, I don't know, I have no idea on geoengineering, but my little understanding of my environment, I realized that people that work in air-conditioned spaces, air-conditioned office, air-conditioned car, as compared to those that work within the place whereby the temperature is hot, those people that work within air-conditioned spaces tend to be less aggressive as compared to people that work in temperate spaces. So I just felt probably maybe because these areas are hot, that will explain the reason why there are conflicts in Africa as well as the Middle East. Well, that day my lecturer told me Australia is hot and there's no conflict in Australia. That debunked my theory as of that day, but did not stop my curiosity as relating to this space. And then in 2000, during my PhD, while I was doing my PhD in South Africa in 2017, I was in AGU and I met Prof. Alan, and he introduced me to the world of geoengineering, and where we are today. So basically that's my journey, and my concern has always been to look at the human implication of geoengineering. And I suppose some of us here, if you are social scientists that here, you will, if this is your first meeting or second, you will probably have the same experience. My first meeting of geoengineering, I was practically confused. I was just listening to a lot of jargons, and I had to write a lot and go read about them and all that. But the point there was, what is the implication of all these things you do as modelers and the likes? What is the direct implication for the human society? And basically that is where we come in. I won't bore you with this. I prepared a slide with the consciousness of the fact that there are social scientists and individuals, policymakers, that are not aware of what you do, and there's a need to, instead of giving out the large words, to just break it down on what geoengineering implies and all that, and the types, carbon dioxide removal and solar radiation management and the like. So I won't bore you with this, but I'll just go to COVID. We're all familiar with COVID, and I must say, this is my first physical presentation, as it is after COVID. So our life has changed as a result of COVID, and there's a lot we can actually learn from COVID. And so before I go to COVID in itself, the general inclination when it comes to geoengineering, there are three major inclinations. First is the fact that a lot of people are not familiar with the subject matter, and that is a serious challenge, right? The large chunk of the world is not familiar with the subject matter. So policymakers and ordinary individuals are also not familiar with the subject matter. Second is the elephant in the room, the big elephant in the room, which is the risky nature of the research, the fact that we don't know much about it, and we are still trying to drop in the dark as it is. And then the ultimate, which is the third, is the moral hazard that comes to that. And when we talk about moral hazard, we start looking at the horizontal and vertical implication of geoengineering. What do I imply by that? Then we understand the fact that with geoengineering, there is going to be regional vulnerabilities, right? There are regions that will be affected more with the engagements, right, into geoengineering. There will be regions that will be affected more, which is the horizontal. And then we'll talk about the vertical implication of that. individuals, depending on the economic standing of these individuals, also determine how they will be affected. So in as much as, let's say, in the global north, if we hypothetically say the global north will not be affected as a region, it is possible that people within the global north that are probably poor will also still be affected in a way. So that's the regional and vertical implication, and then so it speaks to the moral hazard and of geoengineering application as it is, and then also the fact that the fear is with engagement on geoengineering comes the discouragement as it is for us to still concentrate on the reduction of emission, greenhouse gas emission. So like I said, my concern in as much as we have geoengineering as either CDR or SRM, I'm more concerned with SRM engagement. But we cannot talk about SRM engagement without SRM research in itself. And so basically, the research is also key. Now, when it comes to COVID impacts, like I said, we are all familiar with COVID and what has transpired within this short period, 2-3 years period from 2020. And the basic point as related to COVID is the swiftness of the spread of COVID. We're familiar with that. And then the impact itself. The impact affected all aspects of lives. And there are different articles in which I've talked about different aspects of COVID. I just try to look at some of the ones I've written as relating to COVID. On education, it has affected education. Most of us we can relate to the fact that our concentration level doing online engagement has reduced and all that. So it affected education, it has affected entertainment, it has affected human security, of which I will still discuss more on this, human security relating to food, environmental security and the likes. And then geopolitics and governance, which is key. I will dwell on this in subsequent slide. How this is a challenge even in geoengineering. So it affected geopolitics and governance in the sense that there were implications for each country, and then in as much as we want to fight the spread of COVID, there were still need for strategic advantage for different countries were still even in propagating solution to COVID. There were interests that everybody tend to cover. That's what we refer to as the max diplomacy. The China angle, the American angle, the throw of blames and the likes, who produced the first vaccine, the implication of vaccine to power politics in the world and the likes. So there were lots that went on around that ground, and then we're familiar with the economic implications of COVID. So basically this is the impact of COVID in general. Now, these are the lessons the response to COVID and the lessons we can pick from that. First is the fact that the entire world went on lockdown. So border closure and the likes, that was the first thing. And everybody seems to respond to that. And then very important point we need to consider is the media sensitization for adaptive response. People did not know what COVID is, just like geoengineering. We're not familiar with what COVID was, but you realize that there were media sensitization, there was different jingles online and offline on what to do, washing of hands, social distancing and the likes. And also with that, there was also both positive and negative media dissemination as related to COVID. The conspiracy of COVID, it's a Western stuff, and it's a China virus, and different stuff that comes with that, with media engagement as related to it. But the beauty of that is that because of the strong media engagement, people tend to want to know more about it, and then practically everybody now have an idea, either distorted idea or real idea as related to what COVID is. And then, like I said, the idea around geopolitics and governance, I think I've explained that a bit. The fight on national interests and collective security. there was clamor on that, and there was still mutual suspicion around the world as relating to the solution for COVID, and that itself also plays into the discourse on geoengineering. For instance, what the previous speaker just spoke about now, we'll start asking ourselves, okay, if this particular region of the world will face more deaths, then will that region, will the government of that region agree to geoengineering, right? So that speaks to the geopolitical implication of what we do here, geoengineering. And then technology and adaptive inequality. Like I said, there was vertical and horizontal vulnerability of people, and the same thing applies when it comes to COVID. Those people that were rich enough, communities or regions that were rich enough, were easily adapted to COVID as compared to those that were not. And then the medical and public health approach, different policies that were coming up as relating to what we need to do. And then the vaccine politics, like I said, who produced first, and the implication of that for power politics and the likes. And then, like I said, there's the Western elite agenda and the survival needs. The conspiracy theory as related to, is COVID a biological weapon? Does it have implication and all that? So basically, these are the response on how COVID, how we went about COVID. And for me, the takeaway points of what we need to do, the lesson we need to learn for geoengineering, is that there's a need for strategic partnership among the various stakeholders. So the question we need to ask ourselves is, what are the roles of this strategic what is the role of strategic partnership? Are there possibility for future partnership? And what are the possible lessons to learn? This is key. And when we talk about this partnership, the diagram we have here, it also speaks to the need for deliberative engagements of community. We need to empower communities, and we need to, in our design of geoengineering platforms and models and the likes, there's a need to include the communities into our designs as it is. And like I said, science generally tend to want to give solution from a top-down approach, in the sense that you think about it in your labs, and you come up with solution in your labs, and you just want to give the community what you think the solution is. But there's also a need for us to, instead of going by that approach, have a more engagement with the community and understand their needs. For instance, when I was looking at the posters yesterday, I made the duty to go through all the posters yesterday. And the question is, how does what we discuss, how does it affect the immediate communities in which we want to look at, not just sitting on our lap? And for me, it's important for us to understand that our designs, our models and the likes is useless if it cannot translate to the usability for the immediate community. And we can only understand this usability if we engage the community itself and understand what they need. If we talk about the temperate region, we talk about India and the likes, what is the implication for the ordinary farmer? How does that influence crop production, right? Is there a need for a change in the adaptation of the farmer as relating to when to produce, or when to go to farm, and when to go to the farm and the like? So all these things are things in which we need to look at. So basically that's on deliberative engagement. And another point is the need for ethics of practice. In this place, there's a need for us to consider both the long-term and the immediate implication of what we do as researchers. And then there's a need for monitoring and governance to avoid stakeholder excesses. Yesterday when the keynote speaker was having a session, I think she talked about the fact that geoengineering funding especially used to be government focused, now we are having more individuals getting involved. And the same thing we apply over time, that as this research is going on, there will be people that will want to individually engage in these things and probably will not follow the protocols. That is, if there's a protocol in the first place to follow. So there's a need for governance structure. There's a need for governance protocol as relating to what we need to do, how do we go about it, right? Not just somebody just sitting in the comfort of their lab, quote unquote, and coming up with a particular research and then just going for it, right? So there's a need for monitoring and governance of geoengineering. And then media engagement, like I said, is key. Without media engagement, the familiarity of people to it will still be what it is. So there's a need for more media engagement. We need to put our work out there. And talking about media engagement, there's a need for us as scientists, as modelers, and whatever field you are working on, to break down your findings to the ordinary language. To ordinary language that people can relate to, policymakers can relate to, because by the time you come up with different graphs and it's not making sense to a policymaker, his mind is shut off. It's just shut down, and everything you say for the next 5-10 minutes, you are just it's just stories, right? So there's a need for us to have everyday language in which we can relate our research in, and then there's a need for transparency in the work itself. Transparency of research and deployment, and the involvement of religious and social structure. This is key for us to embrace the people, right? You have to involve the social structures in the communities. You need to talk to religious leaders, you need to talk to community leaders, you need to identify these stakeholders and relate with them for geoengineering engagements to happen. Thank you very much.
I feel like that was a fantastic follow-up to Tony's presentation. Lots of interesting connections there. Sam, I'm guessing I have a question.
Hello, thank you for the talk. That was very interesting and definitely brought up me wondering sort of two very closely related questions. One, I thought about community engagement, and you mentioned dealing with stakeholders' accesses. Comparing to COVID, I sort of dread to think what would have happened if you asked 10 ordinary people around the world for input on the development of COVID vaccines, because 4 or 5 or 6 of them would probably tell you wild conspiracy theories about those vaccines. So one question, and this topic is also going to be very vulnerable to that. On a similar note, how do you ensure that these kinds of processes don't have the effect of delaying and putting roadblocks in front of research, given the urgent need for progress?
Okay, thank you very much for that. As much as possible, when it comes to works like this, there is still a need for a percentage of lead in which the stakeholders bring to the table, right? You are the enlightened group, quote unquote, the enlightened stakeholder, have a lot to put into the direction of flow, but as much as possible, there's a need for them to also contribute, to bring in their input on what they feel they need, right? Yes, there's a need for vaccine, but vaccine is just not the only implication in which we had the COVID, right? There are livelihoods issues, human security issues that's transpired in the course of COVID. I'll tell you, for instance, there was a protest and looting that happened in South Africa in July 2021. That itself was as a result of lack of engagement with the community. The government just decided to extend the lockdown, right? And the extension of the lockdown led to reaction, and then before you know it, there was loss of livelihood, there was loss of economic means for a lot of people. People start looting different shops and places in some part of South Africa. So these are some of the things in which there's a need for engagement in. And like I said, I don't have all the solution. I'm here to also create more thinking.
Andrew Lockley, UCL. I don't know whether you're aware of this, because it wasn't in the academic literature, but there was a guy called Niels Gilman who wrote an article in The Breakthrough talking about avocado environmentalism. And you may be familiar with the concept of watermelon environmentalism, which is a thin green skin covering a deep red interior, and that's how a lot of left-wing environmentalism is portrayed. Avocado environmentalism is the idea that you've got a kind of eco-fascist brown shirt movement where the green veneer covers a more ethno-nationalist inner sentiment, right? And for me, the big takeaway of COVID is how willing people were to throw other nations and ethnicities under the bus. And I think that the big lesson for climate change is something that you actually put quite deep down in one of your sub-points, that when situations become challenging through disease or through scarce resources, history shows some pretty dark lessons about what humans do to each other. The flu pandemic in the 1930s was one of the precursors to the Holocaust, and famines such as in Rwanda precipitated the Hutu and Tutsi genocide, right? I think that if we are going to get serious about climate change, triggering the wholesale loss of territory in Bangladesh, triggering heat waves that kill millions in northern India is envisaged in the Ministry of the Future. The core lessons of COVID, as far as I can see it, are that nations and ethnicities will turn on each other, and the results will not be pleasant.
I think you're all correct with all the points you just raised now. And like I said, this is something for us to consider. And that also speaks to the need for media engagements too. Consider the fact that there are different groups that will come with both in support and opposing the position of geoengineering, for instance. And there's just a need that is there. And also coming to the realization that interests will always matter. Man is by nature selfish. And I tell people it's not a bad thing to be selfish, because that's our nature. But there can be position of compromise whereby we allow some things to happen. Yeah, thank you very much for that.
Hi, I had a question about this idea of community engagement. So I was just wondering, in your opinion, what do you think is the best way to go about that? Like, would that be, scientists like us trying to just have public talks where we explain the science? Is it creating some sort of intermediary who goes between the scientists and the public? Is it like social science doing, research on, public opinion? I'm just wondering, like, what is the best way to go about that? Like, should it be, atmospheric scientists trying to talk to the people? Should we create new jobs that's their position to do stuff like that? Yeah, just wondering, what do you think, how do we go about community engagement?
Okay, thank you very much. First, there's no hardline rule to what to do. At this point, everything is correct as long as you do it within a space of transparency and the need for engagement. And like one of us just raised now, just to imagine what will happen if the people have to be involved in the creation of vaccine and the likes. But there's a need for us to go out there to understand the opinion of the people. Like I said, first, people don't know about it. Currently, I'm undertaking a research as relating to perception in the global south. This time I'm concentrating on Africa, whereby I want to understand what they think about geoengineering and different points as relating to that. Because the point is that what I've realized as my gap is the fact that people that tend to tell us what the global south think are more or less from the global north, right? So there's a need for us to understand what an ordinary global south individual thinks about geoengineering and how it affects their lives and the likes. So currently I'm doing that. and carrying out the survey in the whole of, in the 54 countries in Africa to understand that. But there's a need for us to go out there, that's just it. You cannot sit in the confines of your lab and just expect things to happen. Yeah.
It was really wonderful talk. My question is similar to Nina's question that she asked. I was really how you talked about involvement of religious and social structures in implementing climate change agendas. So I've seen these examples in India succeeding, for example, reviving the old tradition of declaring a forest as God forest that is not cut, and secondly, like planting some holy trees like people which they can plant, and because it's considered holy, and also declaring, for example, being vegetarian is a thing in Hinduism, Buddhism, so promoting those practices will be really helpful for climate change agendas. So yeah, so I think these are really helpful practices that we can promote and connect to public.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for your presentation. It was a very extraordinary insight into the world of hard science, geoengineering, research, etc. And generally, as climate scientists, we generally tend to not really look at the social aspect of things. And you really open our eyes better to that. So my question is more into social engagement. How can we engage a community? Especially, let me put in place this short scenario in which, let's say we already know everything we need to know about geoengineering in terms of risk, side effects, benefits, and etc. And we get to the point in the future where that's the way to save the planet. And now we need to engage with the community. Based on the findings presented by the previous presenter, which is showing us that heat-related death probably is likely to increase due to geoengineering in most parts of West Africa, the Sahel, and part of Southern Africa, Latin America, part of Latin America, and India, etc. How are you going to engage those communities or religious leaders from those communities to tell them that, oh, geoengineering is probably the solution, but people are going to die in your community? How are you going to convince them to say yes, or to engage them to agree that geoengineering is the solution with global benefits, but very negative benefit for their own community?
Okay, thank you very much. I think that question is just direct. You know the fact that, because like we said, the selfishness of man, how to convince a community that they will be the sacrifice for the entire world, that would be a long shot, right? But like from this, you realize that these are different deliberative engagement platforms which we can go about. First is the space of manipulation, which is what we want to discourage, right? The fact that because you are the enlightened one and you want to just manipulate the community and just tell them what to do, top-down approach, solution giving. As much as possible, it starts from information, right? Informing the community of what there needs to be, and then having a consultation with them, partnership, and then delegated power, and then citizen control as it is, depending on the sensitive nature of what we intend to go about. But whatever the case may be, either that community will be negatively affected or positively affected, there's a need that they also get involved in that decision making. That's the most important. There's a need for them to get involved, and there's a need for you to engage that particular community, understand the structure in that community, and engage them. Let their voice also be heard. And as much as possible, since you are quote unquote the enlightened stakeholder here, you present the point as it is. But as much as possible, we tend to avoid the space of manipulation. But presenting the facts of the case and then presenting your argument. And then it goes back to the discussion on media engagements too. This is how the community also gets familiar with what is happening.
Fantastic, thank you, Patrick.